Hey everybody, good to see you all on CBSN. I'm joined by my colleague Anne-Marie Green, who is, of course, at the CBS News Philadelphia Bureau, while I am here at the CBS News Upper West Side Bureau of Manhattan. Of course, we've got a lot to cover today. Anne-Marie, lots going on, including discussion around the president's immigration order. The president's been tweeting about Iran. We've got some updated, startling news from the director of the CDC that we want to talk about. So we're going to dig into that, beginning in Washington, where we have Weijia Jiang standing by, CBS News White House correspondent. So Weijia, let's talk about this. The president has released the new details of his plan to restrict immigration to the United States. What does it look like?
Well, he has released some details, but not the actual text of the executive order. And that's what's really going to matter, because there are still many questions about how this is going to operate, what exemptions there are, and whether he can actually do this. But we know that he plans to suspend the issuing of green cards for at least 60 days. And his reasoning is that by doing that, it'll cut back on competition for American jobs as the economy tries to rebound. I heard you and Anne-Marie talking earlier, and you were absolutely right that many people who would receive a green card are already here. And so what does that mean for them? Of course, we know that for those who are waiting abroad, that's going to delay what's probably already been years-long processes that included a lot of money and time spent. But what about those people who are in the country legally? And so that's why critics are very quick to say that this is just a political stunt and the president trying to fulfill a campaign promise. You'll remember he not only talked about reducing illegal immigration, but even legal immigration. And he was asked about this specifically, about whether this was all to play to his base. He said, no, I'm not doing that at all, and insists that he's really just trying to carve out more room for Americans as they look for work.
Yeah, and just to sort of add to that, chances are if you're in this country awaiting a green card, you probably have some other sort of visa that allows you to work, like an H-1B visa. So you already have a job. Maybe you have a job that you have been furloughed from, or you're working from home, but it's difficult to sort of see what sort of impact this would have on jobs. Yet this is the focus for the president. Why is he focusing on the economic impact of COVID-19 when pretty much all experts say we still have to focus on the health impact, particularly testing, because without testing, we can't get back to doing business?
Well, the two really can't be separated in the president's eyes. In fact, he has said many, many times, without stats to back it up, that the economic impact could lead to just as many health problems and deaths as the disease itself. You know that he has said the cure cannot be worse than the disease. And so he really is focused on both pieces of this. We should mention that, of course, the economy is something that he continues to tout as one that he built and made the best that the country has ever seen. And that is another centerpiece of his campaign as he, looks to re-election. But you're right. Even though the president says that he is focused on testing, that the testing capacity in this country is great and millions of people can get tests, that's not what we're hearing from the states. And we know that the Democrats claim the administration has agreed to a national testing policy as part of that new round of financial aid. $25 billion is supposed to go to testing. Well, we haven't heard details about a national testing strategy because, again, the president has said so many times that the burden is on the states. And so there's a lot of moving pieces here. All are linked together. But yeah, I mean, it seems that whenever the president is questioned about some of his policy decisions, at the core of it, he always goes back to the economy, even though with regard to this immigration policy we're talking about, it's not clear how this will actually help the economy. In fact, one of his own economic advisors, Dennis Hassett, who was brought back to the White House specifically to work on economic policy related to COVID-19, said from the White House yesterday that this actually won't offer any short-term help for the economy because there's so little movement already, people coming in and out. So he's saying it's not going to help. The president insists it will. A lot more questions left.
So let's stick with the subject of the economy, Weijia. The Senate has approved the new stimulus bill. What does it include?
So this includes another $310 billion for small businesses, hopefully to get loans so they can stay alive. It also includes money, like we just talked about, for testing and hospitals, for example, to get more PPE, to keep people working. And so we know that this is going to go to the House tomorrow, very likely pass, and then the president has already indicated he will sign it, which is critical to those small businesses who missed out on the first round of funding and really need this money to keep their doors open.
And then, so beyond that, what are the next steps that are being planned to get the economy up and running?
You know, the president keeps talking about reopening the country. He says many states are ready to go. 20 states are ready, accounting for 40% of the population, according to him. But, there's still a lot of mixed messaging because these federal guidelines that we're supposed to be following about social distancing don't expire until May 1st. We're already seeing other states starting to pull back and announce their plans, like Georgia, which has been controversial. And so, again, there's a lot of mixed messages coming from the podium about whether people should listen to the federal guidelines or whether now states have authority to tell people to do something else. And so the next steps are really to get more of a coordination, more of an effort from the White House to explain to people what they're supposed to do. But I think for the most part, people are just still following the guidelines, at least in most states that we are seeing. But it's not a guarantee. We've been reporting on all the protests happening because other folks are really ready to get back to work and back to some sense of normal, even though public health experts say we're not ready to do that because the widespread testing is still not available.
And it's a good point that you make there, Weijia. In a tweet this morning, the president referenced that states are beginning to reopen their economies, and he also promised protection for seniors. But I guess the question becomes, certainly all of us want to see our fellow citizens back at work. All of us want a return to normalcy. But when you look at the polling, Pew, 66% of the American people concerned about reopening too fast. NBC Wall Street Journal, 58% concerned about opening too fast. Yahoo YouGov, 71% of the public concerned about opening too fast. The question becomes, yes, getting back to some sense of normalcy, but not at the expense of our lives. So is the president listening? I mean, who is advising the president as far as this idea of reopening these economies vis-a-vis the medical professionals who you referenced, Weijia, who are saying, look, take it easy, take it slow, because as the CDC director pointed out in an interview that he gave to the Washington Post, come this winter, we may see another spike in coronavirus cases if we're not prepared for that.
Well, the president hears from a lot of advisors, not just medical ones, but also his economic ones. And the White House claims that they're all working together, hand in hand, to create the best decisions for the American people. But, I can tell you that the president said the decision about when to reopen the country would be maybe the biggest decision of his entire life. And then just a few days later, he said it was up to the states to start reopening. So it's almost as if he had already made up his mind because, again, he knows that the economy is so critical. Of course, you're right. We all want it to reopen. But he's been specifically asked about what do you tell consumers who are not ready to go out and actually shop at these businesses that are reopening, who are still afraid? And he, tries to offer reassurances that the governors will make the right decisions and that everyone should take precautions. But again, not to harp on this, but the real key to doing this is tracking the virus. How do you track the virus? With testing, with easily accessible, quick testing, and also contact tracing. So people have that peace of mind when they go out here and try to, be with one another again. And what we're hearing from states is just that it's not there yet. And it's because they don't have the supplies to do it. Well, they're begging the White House to help them, and so far, even though the president says the administration is going to do that, we haven't seen details about how it will organize the supply chain to make sure that distribution is happening so we can have the testing and get back to normal.
Weijia, before we let you go, I want to ask you about something else, a different topic that the president was tweeting about this morning, Iran. And he announced that he instructed the Navy to shoot down Iranian gunboats if they harass American vessels. So this is something that probably didn't get a lot of news time, but the Navy had said about a week ago that one of their vessels was being harassed. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
So the president
also, how do you shoot down a boat?
Well, that's a great question, Vlad. I don't know. Some boats, I'm not even going to go there, but it's a great question for the president. I know. And, all jokes aside, I think that the president is referring to what Anne-Marie just mentioned, which is that report from the Navy that, there were Iranian ships that were dangerously and aggressively approaching American vessels in the Persian Gulf. Of course, the president wasn't specific about what he was responding to, and he has certainly issued warnings about other provocations before, but we can assume that that's what he's talking about. It's also notable that shortly before he sent that tweet, Iran's Revolutionary Guard revealed that it had gotten its first military satellite up and going. And so that raises a lot of questions about the country's capability and plans and motivations for producing more weapons. And so I think, the bottom line is that this is another warning that the president is issuing Iran, but he's offered plenty of those before, and it does not appear the deterrent is working if this ship is approaching American ones in the Gulf. So I think it's just something we have to monitor and see what else he will say about this, because again, when you're conducting, as we talked about yesterday, domestic policy or foreign policy via tweet, it leaves a lot of unanswered questions.
And Weijia, I know, Anne-Marie, we're going to wrap this discussion up. Hang on one second, guys. I just have a quick question, because Weijia, I know that we've been practicing, the White House press corps has been practicing social distancing in these briefings that the president gives. And so I don't know if CBS News has a seat this evening at the update, but the president tweeting also that the CDC director was totally misquoted by fake news, CNN on COVID-19. He will be putting out a statement. Do we know what that is about? Do we know if he's talking about the interview that the CDC director gave to the Washington Post about this dire warning about what could potentially happen this winter, or is it something else? And it will be interesting. The reason I was asking about the seat at the White House press briefing later this evening, Weijia, it'll be interesting to see if the CDC director refutes what he told the Washington Post and other news organizations, because the president seems to be indicating he's putting out a statement.
That's right. And it's not just the director of the CDC who has issued that warning, but other members of the Corona Task Force have said that, this could very well come back in the fall. I think the president is having an issue with the degree to which, the director was quoted saying that it could be even worse. But one thing that has been kind of missing is his presence. Director Redfield has not been in these briefings as often as other members. And when you're talking about the head of the CDC, it's something that you would expect almost every day. But we know they have clashed before, even though the president says the CDC has been extremely helpful and they're working together every day. But it will be interesting to see if he is there in the briefing today or what kind of statement he issues, because was, if this is an expert who is going out offering his expert opinion, but it's something that the president does not like, well, that begs more questions to the president about why he is using this authority to almost pressure that director to come out and say something differently. To answer your other question, I do have a seat today. I'll be in there, and hopefully, if the CDC is there, we can ask him directly to clarify what the president meant.
All right, Weijia, we look forward to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.